Welcome back to the Deep Dive. Today we're tackling a source stack that focuses on, well, one of the most immediate and critical public safety crises in the world, road safety policy in India. And this isn't just, about traffic congestion or minor incidents. We're talking about a national tragedy on an industrial scale. Okay, let's unpack this. The central, and it's a really staggering and heartbreaking fact that drives every single strategy we're about to discuss, is this. Road accidents in India claim over 150,000 lives annually. That is just a massive loss of human potential every single year. The structured response to this crisis is the National Road Safety Policy, or NRSP, which was launched back in 2010 by the Ministry of Road Transport and Highways, MoRTH. So over the next few minutes, we're going to synthesize the policy structure. We'll dive deep into its comprehensive 4E strategy, understand the current scope of the crisis, and then look at the real-time implementation efforts, especially during this current National Road Safety Month, the mission, to really give you an expert briefing on what makes this initiative so critical and how a nation is trying to systematically save lives.
And that scale, that number you just mentioned, that's the essential starting point for this deep dive. When you really analyze the statistics that are in your sources, the disparity is a massive red flag. India accounts for a truly shocking 11% of global road deaths, yet the country only has about 1% of the world's total vehicle population.
1%. That is a severe concentration of risk. It suggests the problem isn't just the sheer volume of traffic, but something systemic.
Exactly. It points to a systemic failure within the environment, the vehicle standards, or driver behavior.
Right.
Precisely. And we often hear those two statistics side by side, but you have to ask why that disparity exists. It implies that for every single vehicle on an Indian road, the risk factor is just exponentially higher than the global average. And unfortunately, the statistics suggest we aren't really easing the curve. Overall accidents rose by 1.2% in 2024.
So it's getting worse.
In some ways, yes. And if we drill down into the immediate cause of these crashes, the human element is just overwhelming. Human error, we're talking things like speeding, drunk driving, distraction, it contributes to a massive 70% of reported cases.
70%? Wow. That is a huge number. That means that while, better roads and safer cars are absolutely vital, any effective policy has to address behavior first and foremost.
Absolutely. And when you think about the victims, the policy has to recognize who is most vulnerable. 40% of the fatalities involve two-wheeler riders who are not wearing helmets.
40%.
And in urban centers, it's pedestrians and cyclists who are facing the highest risks. So all of this informs the policy. The solution can't just focus on the car driver. It has to protect the most vulnerable users of that road space.
And beyond the just heartbreaking human tragedy, there's a profound economic drag here. This isn't cheap for the national economy.
No, far from it. Road crashes cost India roughly 3 to 5% of its GDP annually.
3 to 5%.
Yes. And that covers the immediate healthcare burden, sure, but it's also lost productivity from injured or deceased workers, insurance costs, infrastructure damage. When you frame the human and economic costs together, you start to understand why MoRTH realized a simple reactive approach just wasn't going to work. It demands the kind of structured, holistic solution that the NRSP provides.
Okay, so that brings us to the solution side. The 4 foundational pillars designed to address that systemic failure. The National Road Safety Policy is built around this comprehensive 4E approach: engineering, enforcement, education, and emergency care. And what's really remarkable about this framework is how each element interlocks. So let's start with engineering, which is all about making the physical environment, the roads, and the vehicles themselves intrinsically safer.
Right. Engineering is the proactive element. The policy breaks this down into safer roads and safer vehicles. For safer roads, the strategy is to align rural and urban designs with international safety standards. This means installing things like pedestrian-friendly crossings, using rumble strips, and crucially, integrating intelligent transport systems, or ITS.
ITS, that sounds very high-tech. For the listener, what does that actually encompass on a typical highway?
That's a great question. ITS isn't just one single thing. It includes smart signals that can adjust traffic flow based on real-time volume, advanced camera monitoring for speed and compliance, and digital signboards that give you immediate hazard warnings.
So it's dynamic.
It's dynamic. It sort of turns a static road into a responsive thinking environment.
And a core part of this engineering focus is on hazard elimination. The sources talk a lot about black spot elimination. That's a bit of policy jargon we should probably clarify.
We should. For the purposes of the NRSP, a black spot isn't just some bad stretch of road. It has a very specific mandated definition. It's a 500-meter stretch where either 5 crashes or 10 fatalities have occurred within the last 3 calendar years.
So it's data-driven.
Very data-driven. And that hard definition is what triggers a mandatory funded engineering response. It ensures that money and resources go exactly where the problem is worst.
That makes the policy very targeted. But what about the second part of engineering safer vehicles? What kind of safety features are now being mandated in manufacturing?
We're seeing mandates for basic life-saving features across the board. Things like ABS brakes, airbags, and speed governors on commercial vehicles. There's also a significant focus on regulating the use and maintenance of all vehicles, including that huge fleet of non-motorized and two-wheeled vehicles, to make sure the entire road environment is standardized.
And this feeds directly back into that massive fatality rate among two-wheeler riders you mentioned. So promoting helmet and seatbelt use isn't just an awareness thing. It's reinforcing the policy's engineering pillar, right? It assumes the crash will happen and just tries to minimize the damage.
Exactly. It's the philosophy that systems, not individuals, should absorb the crash energy. That's really the core of the WHO's safe system approach. You acknowledge human fallibility, and then you design infrastructure and vehicles to compensate for it.
Okay, so if engineering is about designing for safety, the next two pillars, education and enforcement, are about regulating that massive 70% human error factor we talked about. The policy bundles these into the concept of safer people.
And this is really where behavioral science meets the law. The strategy is twofold. First, strengthening driver training and licensing standards, so it's not just a rubber stamp, but ensures actual confidence. Second, integrating foundational road safety principles right into the school curricula, aiming for a cultural change over a generation.
And the documentation emphasizes zero tolerance for violations. If 70% of crashes are human error, that suggests an incredible burden on law enforcement. I have to ask, is the 4E framework maybe too heavily weighted toward policing to correct bad behavior that the infrastructure design might actually be causing?
That's a critical question. And the policy does acknowledge that poor engineering often forces human error. For instance, poorly marked roads or, inadequate signage can compel drivers to make high-risk maneuvers.
Right.
So while enforcement is strict strengthening penalties and deploying technology, the training component is fascinating because it goes beyond just threats of fines. The training modules use methods like role-playing safe driving scenarios. This isn't just rote memorization. It's about moving beyond classroom theory to embedding muscle memory for decision-making under stress.
So it's about the cognitive load.
It is, the kind of cognitive load that distinguishes a technically competent driver from a truly safe driver.
That's a strong pivot. It targets the mental preparedness you need when you're dealing with a complex environment. Okay, let's move to the final E, the one that directly impacts fatality rates after a crash has already happened: post-crash response or emergency care.
This pillar is centered entirely on the golden hour, that initial 60 minutes following a crash where immediate effective medical intervention is most likely to save a life.
The golden hour.
Yes, and the strategy is all about closing the logistical gap. That means equipping major highways with advanced trauma centers and significantly improving the training of first responders, ensuring they can stabilize victims rapidly and understand pre-hospital care protocols.
The sources also mention hands-on training for this E. It sounds like it's about empowering every citizen to help bridge that golden hour gap.
Absolutely. The training is very immediate and very actionable. Participants simulate emergency drills, focusing on basic trauma first aid like how to quickly stop severe bleeding, stabilizing the victim, and crucially, knowing exactly when and how to activate the National 108 ambulance service efficiently.
That knowledge alone can make the difference.
It makes the difference between a system failure and a successful intervention.
So we've established the structure. Now, let's connect this policy framework, the NRSP, to what's actually happening on the ground right now in the early weeks of 2026. This isn't theoretical, it's an active campaign.
It is, and its current relevance is really defined by the calendar. We are currently in the National Road Safety Month, which runs from January 1st to the 31st, 2026. And the goal is very focused, with this year's theme being Zero Fatality Month.
That's a bold, highly visible target that unifies all the state and local efforts. And this is driven by annual awareness campaigns, quizzes, public pledges, and slogan contests, often centralized through the mygov.in platform.
And we're seeing some fascinating examples of that enforcement pillar being integrated into, well, local commerce. You can take the case study from Uttar Pradesh for 2026. They are enforcing a strict no helmet, no fuel rule at fuel pumps.
That's incredibly clever. It's
Yeah.
a transactional way to ensure compliance. You suddenly make the local fuel pump operator a decentralized part of the national enforcement mechanism.
It's highly effective.
It ensures compliance before the vehicle even enters a major road.
Exactly. It makes the risk of non-compliance immediate and personal. Now, this kind of local enforcement needs robust institutional support and critically dedicated funding.
Okay, so let's talk about that funding. How is this enormous long-term national effort actually paid for?
The funding mechanism is really important for continuity. The central oversight is managed by the National Road Safety Board, but the money itself comes from assess on fuel.
And for our listener, what does it mean that it's funded by assess?
Unlike a general tax that just goes into a large government pool, assess is what's called a hypothecated tax. It's dedicated. It means the funds collected must be used specifically for road safety, R&D, and infrastructure improvement.
So it's ring-fenced.
It's ring-fenced. This dedicated revenue stream, tied directly to road use, ensures the continuity of funding and protects the policy from being reliant on fluctuating annual budgets.
And that dedicated funding stream allows for long-term professionalization, which your sources also highlight.
Absolutely. The policy isn't just about policing, it's about building a competent professional sector. We see a huge variety of professional development opportunities created under this NRSP umbrella. For young people, the National Road Safety Mission offers online quizzes and official certificates. But for engineers and infrastructure experts, there are some serious training pathways.
For example?
Well, for instance, IIT Delhi is running its international course on road safety this February 2026. And there are specific India Up capacity building workshops. These train auditors and engineers on the specific methodology needed to identify, report, and fix those high-risk blind spots we talked about earlier.
So the policy is actively creating a national cohort of safety experts.
That's right. It shows the policy is looking far beyond just the immediate behavioral push, and it's focusing instead on long-term capacity building for the infrastructure designers themselves.
Now let's circle back to you, the listener. How does this massive, complex policy translate into actionable knowledge? What are the key takeaways from the hands-on training that's emphasized in the policy materials?
The training is really designed to translate the 4Es into daily practice. It starts with practical, mental skills like defensive driving.
Right.
That means actively learning how to spot distractions, not just in yourself, but in others, and understanding how to accurately calculate a safe following distance under various loads and speeds. These are the preventative skills.
And then the other side is the intervention skills, the first aid demo. Just knowing that immediate knowledge can bridge the gap during that golden hour is key.
Exactly. Knowing the steps to stop critical bleeding and having the 108 emergency number hardwired into your brain is the difference between life and death. The policy really reinforces its central closing message. Road safety is a shared duty. It's not solely the government's responsibility.
So what does this all mean for someone who just wants to be more informed and maybe more active in their own community?
It means engaging with the commitment. The training actively encourages participants to commit to one specific action. Maybe it's always wearing your helmet or ensuring you check for road hazards and report them through local channels. For anyone who wants to follow up on this national effort and understand the official guidelines, the MoRTH Road Safety Portal is the primary official resource.
Okay, so to recap this deep dive, we covered the heartbreaking scale of over 150,000 annual fatalities. We explored the rigorous structural solution of the 4E framework: engineering, enforcement, education, and emergency care. And we examined the real-time implementation through the Zero Fatality Month push this January. This entire national mission is really summed up by the policy's concluding quote, "A safer India begins with you." But let's leave you with a final thought-provoking question that builds on some of the tension we discussed. The NRSP is a comprehensive policy, and it's focused heavily on engineering improvements and behavioral enforcement. However, since the data clearly shows the most vulnerable users, the pedestrians and two-wheeler riders, bear the highest fatality burden, how much faster could a country tackle road deaths if the fundamental design philosophy shifted? If infrastructure prioritized the safety, space, and speed restrictions required for those vulnerable users first, before optimizing for high-speed motor vehicle flow and driver compliance, it's a fundamental challenge of design philosophy for the future. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. We'll see you next time.